Many people who have written on the subject of allowances say it is not a good idea to pay your child for work around the home. These jobs are a normal part of family life. Paying children to do extra work around the house, however, can be useful. It can even provide an understanding of how a business works. Allowances give children a chance to experience the things they can do with money. They can share it in the form of gifts or giving to a good cause. They can spend it by buying things they want. Or they can save and maybe even invest it. Saving helps children understand that costly goals require sacrifice. You have to cut costs and plan for the future. Requiring children to save part of their allowance can also open the door to future saving and investing. UEA's School of Biological Sciences academic, Dr. Michael Wormstone, who led the study, said, secondary visual loss responds well to treatment with laser surgery. But as life expectancy increases, the problems of cataract and posterior capsule opacification will become even greater in terms of both patient well-being and economic burden. It's essential that we find better ways to manage the condition in future. As a result, researchers are designing new artificial lenses that can be placed into a capsular bag that stays open, instead of shrink-wrapping closed, which currently occurs. It is believed that, through the new approach, fluid in the eye can flow around the artificial lens, therefore diluting and washing away the cell signaling molecules that encourage cell regrowth. A total of 83,900 refugees have arrived under the Homes for Ukraine scheme since it began in March. Refugees were matched with sponsors who agreed to house them for 6 months, and were paid £350 a month. Not all matches have been successful. Government data reveals that since the war began in February, 1,335 Ukrainian households, including 945 families with children, have registered as homeless. That figure is set to soar from next month. Analysis by children's charity Barnardo's, Labour and the Liberal Democrats say that, based on feedback from refugee sponsors, between 15,000 and 21,000 Ukrainians could be homeless by the winter, rising to more than 50,000 by the middle of next year. The importance of physical activity for health was identified over 50 years ago. During the 1950s, comparisons of bus drivers with more physically active bus conductors and office-based telephonists with more physically active postmen demonstrated lower rates of coronary heart disease and smaller uniform sizes in the more physically active occupations. This research led the way for further investigation, and evidence now clearly shows the importance of physical activity in preventing ill health. It is important for us to be active throughout our lives. Physical activity is central to a baby's normal growth and development. This continues through school and into adulthood and older years. In the past few decades, Australia has taken a real step toward treating women with dignity and respect. Young women are being brought up knowing that they can do anything, as shown by inspiring role models in medicine such as 2003 Australian of the Year Professor Fiona Stanley. Almost all of the pageant victors are wafer thin, reinforcing the message that thin equals beautiful. This ignores the fact that men and women come in all sizes and shapes. In a country where up to 60% of young women are on a diet at any one time, and 70% of schoolgirls say they want to lose weight, despite the fact that most have a normal BMI, such messages are profoundly hazardous to the mental health of young Australians. Autism is a disorder characterized by impairments in communication, social interaction, and repetitive behaviors. Over the past 40 years, the measured prevalence of autism has multiplied roughly tenfold. While progress has been made in understanding some of the factors associated with increased risk and rising prevalence, no one knows with certainty what causes autism, or what caused autism prevalence to rise so precipitously. There is, however, a growing awareness among scholars that focusing solely on individual risk factors such as exposure to toxicants, prenatal complications, or parental education is insufficient to explain why autism prevalence rates have increased so stunningly. Social and institutional processes likely play an important role. For example, changes in diagnostic criteria and an influx of resources dedicated to autism diagnosis may be critical to understanding why prevalence rates have risen. Increased awareness and social influence have been implicated in the rise of autism and a variety of comparable disorders, where social processes mimic the effects of contagion. Studies have examined the contribution of changes in diagnostic criteria and diagnostic substitution to rising autism prevalence rates, but the importance of institutional factors, resources for diagnosis, and greater awareness have not been systematically assessed. The sociological literature on health and inequality, however, provides substantial motivation for exploring how individual and community-level effects operate to shape the likelihood of an autism diagnosis. Notwithstanding the lack of justification for the premise that national dishes are, of necessity, founded on ingredients native to the country, after all, Italy's gastronomic identity is tied to the non-indigenous tomato, Thailand's to the non-indigenous chili. The reality is that Australians do not eat indigenous foods in significant quantities. The exceptions are fish, crustaceans and shellfish from oceans, rivers and lakes, most of which are unarguably unique to this country. Despite valiant and well-intentioned efforts today at promoting and encouraging the consumption of native resources, bush foods are not harvested or produced in sufficient quantities for them to be a standard component of Australian diets, nor are they generally accessible. The need to improve the quality of education is well accepted across OECD and other countries as they seek to strengthen their human capital to underpin their modern knowledge economies. Improved equity is also important for this purpose, since the demand for high-level skills is widespread and the opportunities for the low-skilled are diminishing. Improved equity in education is also important for social cohesion. There are countries in which the education system seems primarily to reproduce existing social arrangements, conferring privilege where it already exists, and denying it where it does not. Even in countries where the diagnosis might be less extreme, the capacity of schooling to build social cohesion is often diminished by the way in which schools separate individuals and groups. Taken together, our contributors show that narrative approaches to Australian history are not as simple as might be imagined. There is of course the issue of what should be included and what should not be. What, after all, makes a moment or an event sufficiently important to be included in an official narrative? Just as importantly, the moments and events that are included in narrative histories are open to multiple interpretations. We hope this collection will provide an important reminder to those wanting to impose a universal history curriculum for our schoolchildren, and indeed a lesson to all Australians wishing to understand their nation's past. History is never simple or straightforward, and it always resists attempts to make it so. All non-human animals are constrained by the tools that nature has bequeathed them through natural selection. They are not capable of striving towards truth, they simply absorb information and behave in ways useful for their survival. The kinds of knowledge they require of the world have been largely preselected by evolution. No animal is capable of asking questions or generating problems that are irrelevant to its immediate circumstances or its evolutionarily designed needs. When a beaver builds a dam, it doesn't ask itself why it does so or whether there is a better way of doing it. When a swallow flies south, it doesn't wonder why it is hotter in Africa, or what would happen if it flew still further south.
Underscoring the whole scene is the heavy drumbeat of musical troops playing their instruments, the sights and sounds of which are enchanting. The balmy warmth of the Moroccan evening adds to the atmosphere, and all this under an ocean of stars makes for a fabulous experience. The Moroccans themselves display legendary hospitality, culturally bound to offer help to visitors. They are extremely friendly, generous and open. One of the great delights when exploring Morocco is its exciting cuisine, and Marrakesh is a veritable food lover's paradise. Whilst our tour is on a half-board basis, to get an authentic taste of the local cuisine, you may choose lunch in the hotel, instead of dinner, to try the city's myriad of atmospheric restaurants and sample the local delicacies.
Have you ever known anyone famous? If so, you may have found that they are remarkably similar to the rest of us. You may have even heard them object to people saying there is anything different about them. "I'm really just a normal guy," protests an actor who has recently rocketed into the spotlight. There is, of course, usually a brief period when they actually start to believe they are as great as their worshipping fans suggest. They start to wear fancy clothes and talk as if everyone should hear what they have to say. This period, however, does not often last long. They fall back to reality as fast as they had originally risen above it all. In El Paso, bilingual education programs have helped raise student scores from the lowest in Texas to among the highest in the nation. Almost all public spaces nowadays have advertisements in sight, and all forms of media, from newspapers to the cinema to the internet, are filled with adverts. This all-pervasive presence reflects the value of advertising to us. Without it, businesses of all types and sizes would struggle to inform potential customers about the products or services they provide, and consumers would be unable to make informed assessments when looking for products to buy and services to use. Without advertising, the promotion of products and practices that contribute to our physical and psychological well-being, medicines to treat minor ailments, insurance schemes to protect us, clothes and cosmetics to make us look and feel better, would be infinitely more problematic than it is. Two decades ago, Kashmiri houseboat owners rubbed their hands every spring at the prospect of the annual influx of tourists. From May to October, the hyacinth-choked waters of Dal Lake saw flotillas of vividly painted shikaras carrying Indian families, boho Westerners, young travelers and wide-eyed Japanese. Carpet sellers honed their skills, as did purveyors of anything remotely embroidered, while the houseboats initiated by the British Raj provided unusual accommodation. Then, in 1989, separatist and Islamist militancy attacked and everything changed. Hindus and countless Kashmiri business people bolted, at least 35,000 people were killed in a decade, the lake stagnated, and the houseboats rotted.